Today I'm going to sharpen a plane blade using the Veritas MK II Honing Guide. Now the Veritas MK II or MK II Honing Guide allows you to sharpen chisels and plane blades up to almost 3 inches wide and from as low as about 10 degrees all the way up to about 54 degrees. It comes with 2 parts, the main clamping guide here and the registration jig. Let me go ahead and show you the close-up the features of the Honing Guide, and then we'll go ahead and put it to use with a plane blade. So here is a close-up of the Honing Guide and the registration jig. The Honing Guide consists of a clamp bar here, and this is where you place your chisel or plane blade, and that is clamped tight using these 2 knobs. You want to make sure that the bar is parallel. These 2 knobs, the screws are projecting the same distance at either end, or else you could end up skewing your chisel or plane blade. So you want to make sure that you got about the same projection all the way across, that this clamping guide is parallel. The other thing is you've got 3 different settings across the top, 1, 2, 3. 2 is for standard angles, 1 is for high angles, and 3 is for low angles or back bevels. And that lines up, coordinates with the registration jig, the same color coding system. It's really easy to see what the projection is based on where you have this setting. I keep mine at number 2, which is standard angles, and you can go anywhere from 15 degrees up to 40 degrees, which is a pretty wide range. You've got the roller assembly here at the base, obviously rolling back and forth across your honing medium. I'll be using water stones today. Of course, you can use whatever you have, water stones, oil stones, sandpaper. And then that also has a micro adjustment here. You can see the little tick is set at 12 o'clock, and by changing that to 3 o'clock and to 6 o'clock, it changes the projections very slightly to easily add a micro bevel. And I'll cover how I take advantage of that in the sharpening. Today I'm going to be using the MK II to sharpen a little block plane blade. Now this block plane blade is decidedly not sharp whatsoever, and the way I like to test for sharpness is by using a piece of paper. Simply take the blade, chisel or plane blade on top, and allow the weight of that blade to go into the paper and try to cut the paper. As you can see, this is not cutting whatsoever. Even if I hold it close to the front and try to slice through it like I would a knife through some butter, it is not even getting close to cutting this paper. If I get in there, it's simply tearing the paper. No cutting action whatsoever. So we're gonna go ahead and sharpen this plane blade. The first step of using the honing guide is figuring out what angle I want to sharpen my chisel or plane blade. This is a block plane, so I'm going to do it at 25 degrees. So I take the little knob here on the registration jig and I'll set that to a positive stop at 25. Now this is, you have to coordinate the color coding here on the registration jig with that on the honing guide. Then I'll simply slide the registration jig onto the honing guide, and there's a little indicator that is approximately the width of your chisel or plane blade. So in this case mine's about 1 3/8, so I'll just set that little registration near the 1 3/8 and go ahead and tighten down the knob. So the registration jig is nice and tight on that sliding dovetail on the honing guide. Flip it over, slide in my plane blade, bevel down, or bevel facing me in this case, and then I'll go ahead and use my thumb and hold it against the side to keep it nice and square to the jig and against the stop. So I just hold my thumb there, which keeps it nice and registered against the projection there. Then I go ahead and tighten down both knobs on the honing guide. 2 knobs on the top, just tighten them down, and I want to tighten them evenly. So I tighten them both the same, going left and right, tighten a little bit, so they're nice and snug. I can also check that I've kept the clamping bar parallel by just feeling these little screws on the top to make sure they're projecting the same amount through those knurled knobs. Now to get ready to use it, simply take off the registration jig, loosen up the knob there, slide that off, and I'm ready to go. Today I'm using Morton water stones in my shop, but of course you can use oil stones, sandpaper, whatever you like to sharpen on. To hold the guide and the blade, there's a handy place here for your thumbs at the back, and then wrap fingers around the front and keep some nice even pressure right here on the front corners. And then simply back and forth, keeping that even pressure. I'm not going to go over my full sharpening in detail in this video, but I have another video how to sharpen a plane blade using this guide that goes in all the details of my sharpening method, so definitely check that out. But very quickly, I'm using Morton Waterstones. I'm going to start with the 220 grit, then move my way to the 1000 grit, and then up to a 4000 grit, and finally a micro bevel on the 8000 grit. Now, speaking of the micro bevel, I do want to show you that on this guide here. Now, we started off with the notch on the roller assembly pointing up. And the way I like to think about it is the notch is basically where this roller assembly is. When it points up, the roller assembly is further towards the top. As we move it down to the 6 o'clock position, that moves the roller assembly down. Now, by moving the roller assembly downwards, we are essentially lifting the back half of the honing guide, which puts more pressure on the very tip of the blade, raising the angle very slightly. That's what gives you the micro bevel. So roller notch pointing up, roller assemblies further up, notch pointing down, pushes the roller assembly down, which raises the blade very slightly to put on our micro bevel. Now, when I switched from the primary bevel to the secondary bevel on my stone, I noticed that the secondary bevel was skewed to my primary bevel. Now, make sure when you're using the honing guide that you're keeping even pressure, using the correct technique, and also make sure that your medium, your water stones, oil stones, whatever, are very flat. But you still might see a little bit of a skew between those two bevels. And that is because as you moved the cam from the 6 o'clock to the 12 o'clock position, if there's any kind of tolerance difference between left to right, you're going to see a little bit of skew on the blade. And we're talking very little. Now, due to geometry, you're going to see a bigger skew on the bevel than you'll actually have here across the tip, which of course is what we care about. Also, if you're very, very slightly out from 90 across the tip, it doesn't really matter because, of course, your planes have a mechanism for making sure that you can protrude, left to right the same amount. What you really care about is making sure that you have a perfectly flat, highly polished surface across the tip of your blade. Now, I spoke to Veritas customer service about this issue, and they got back to me with some awesome information about it. For me, it's not a big deal. We're talking about micro degree differences across side to front, which don't really matter. But if you find it's an issue, definitely get in touch with them. Puts all the pressure there on the back on the other edge, and just a few strokes back and forth is all it takes. So let's go back to our paper test and see how sharp we got this blade. Now, this blade doesn't weigh a whole lot, but I'll rest it on top, and the weight of the blade doesn't quite enter the paper, but if I give a tiny push, straight down. Wow, that's nice. And if I hold it close and slice like I'm slicing some bread, which is easier to do, that gives just nice smooth cuts. You can check out the paper, how it's just a really nice smooth cut. And that's a great, what I find to be a more of an objective test to how sharp you're getting your plane blades and your chisels. Of course, the proof is in the wood, but this is a great test as you're going through the sharpening. So that's using the MK II or Mark II from Veritas to sharpen a plane blade. What I love about this honing jig is that it is really pretty simple to use, and it provides a wide variety of angles that you can quickly throw in plane blades, chisels, and hone and sharpen. It's color coded, so it's easy to remember. The materials are great. I use this with water stones, and if you ever use water stones, they're really messy. They get that slurry everywhere. This finish on the MK II is easily cleaned up. It's easy to take apart to get in and clean it up if you leave it sitting around maybe for a month or so before using it again. Cleans up great. Everything works really well. Positive adjustments and stops. The whole thing is fabulous. There's even a skew registration jig for doing skewed angles with the MK II. And of course, it comes with just an awesome set of instructions that details everything that you can do with this honing guide. There's also a Camber Roller, which is an optional replacement roller that allows you to put a slight camber across a plane iron, which really helps eliminate planing tracks. So if you're in the market for a honing guide, an upgrade to your sharpening system, or you're starting a sharpening system, the MK II from Veritas is a fantastic honing guide that serves well when you're just getting going with sharpening and for years to come.